when will inflation come down? I could answer this question by pointing to the inflation forecasts of private forecasters or of FOMC participants, which broadly show a significant decline over the next year. The forecast
Welcome back to Financial Stockholm. I'm Christopher Crystal. Today is December 6th, and we have our Advent season here in Sweden. And these are our views on what we're seeing in the Swedish markets and what we're interpreting from them. So it's a relatively quiet day for a news cycle here in Sweden. So we see that Chinese manufacturing orders are down 40%. We talked about this, and we talked about the shipping orders or the shipping decreasing. And this is very, very negative for the global GDP. And this plays in with the fact that you saw OPEC Plus cutting production by 2 million and coming out over the weekend saying they're going to hold with that production cut. And they may even go down another 500,000, or they may increase by 500,000. But they're not going to do anything more than marginal increase to this 2 million a day barrel production cut. So the economists within the OPEC Plus, see the world economy slowing down. They see the trade slowing, and so they've cut their production. And we're getting verification of this through the Chinese shipping and now the Chinese manufacturing. Okay, so and the one key component that would help us out on inflation when things can turn around would be logistics. Now, logistics have not been resolved. However, we did see China, buying into the port in Hamburg. So taking a 25 or just under a 25% stake, and that was approved by the German government. And then shortly thereafter, we see some German industries moving over to China to produce their goods there because China has a strong, stable network for electricity. So their grid is more secure than the European, and they're expanding their infrastructure on the electrical grid. So they're building nuclear plants and they're building coal plants. But guess who's the worst coal polluter in the world today? If you judge it by per capita, Germany. Okay, so China is phasing out these inefficient coal plants. Germany is using the old coal plants because they don't have any gas, and the gas that they do have is coming from Qatar and from the United States. The United States price is roughly triple what they were paying, so their economy is going to be negatively hurt, and that's why you saw companies like BASF, which lost 800 million, shifting production over to India and China, where they have secure electricity. And then if you look at a US component or a competitor called Dow Chemical, they're actually building their own chemical plant energy system. So they're building their own power station for their for their chemical production, and that's going to be 500 million. So you look at what BASF is doing, the largest European employer with 65,000 people in total globally, 55,000 people in Germany, is not able to produce in Europe. And then you see companies like Volvo Cars saying they're going to go electrical. You see Volkswagen saying they're going to go electrical. You saw BMW saying they were going to be producing electrical in England. BMW is shifting over to China. So Great Wall Motor over in China, they'll be doing the electrical for BMW. Volvo, it's going to be Northvolt batteries for the electrical. However, it's a question of where will they be able to produce this? Will they be able to continue in Skellefteå, where we already have increases in power? We're the worst cost or the highest cost in Europe right now for electrical in Sweden. And the north, which was insulated from this bad electrical grid we have in Sweden, is now suffering the same prices we have here in the south. So this is going to dramatically shift where we're going to do manufacturing. So when Volkswagen comes out and says the other day they're going to do car production in Europe and that it's going to be electrical by 2030 or 2035, we don't have the grid set up yet for this. And when we look at our former nuclear, so if you look at the cost on solar, you look at the cost on windmills, and you look at the produced electricity and the cost of that, you see that nuclear is actually cheaper. The problem with the nuclear is when you put the nuclear in and you need to run the nuclear 24 hours. If you add in the intermittent and you're subsidizing it, you kill your pricing on the nuclear. So you make the nuclear unaffordable, which is why we closed down nuclear plants here in Sweden. However, in France, what they're doing is they're now building more windmills instead of nuclear. Now, if you need power 24 hours of the day, so like if you don't know when you're going to get a heart attack, or you don't know when you're going to be in an accident and you need to go to the hospital, you need 24 hours because you never know. If you have a society that operates and you have residential homes and you have industry, you need good amount of power round the clock. There will be periods of time where there won't be so much power used, but you need roughly a steady, constant supply. And you need a constant 50 hertz here in Europe. You need 60 hertz in the US for your baseline power to your power stations. But with nuclear, you can maintain this easily and you have a steady, constant pricing. So we see this as a big problem here in Sweden. And we have our former Miljö Party leader, Per Bolund. He had a job as a prosecutor in the government before, and he was also on the board of a fraudulent financial scam company, which prevented him from taking other positions, but that was called Aura, and they defrauded pension investors in Sweden. But he's now debating the cost of renewables, and he's saying that the science doesn't hold up. And I would challenge him to have a debate with Bjorn Lomborg, who would show him easily that Per Bolund is mistaken. He could go with Americans like Steve Koonin, or he could even talk to somebody like Michael Schellenberger. But those would be the top three to talk to. And then we can go on with others. Maybe Roger Pilkey would also be very good. There's a number of people, and Pilkey's over in Norway right now, so maybe we could get that where Bolund could talk to Pilkey. However, so we see that, and we see a lot of political mudslinging still. The gasoline and diesel prices are coming down slightly, but not a significant amount, because with the higher electricity costs, that'll offset these prices. So our inflation will continue to be a issue for the Swedish bank. And so the question is, how much will the Swedish Fed raise in February? Will it be 25? Will it be 50? Will they go another 75? We don't know yet. We can only wait and see. And we have to keep an eye on the inflation. And so that brings us to our Swedish society. What's happened? Well, the current government is largely controlled, or the government positions are Moderaterna, the Christian Democrat, and then they're also the Liberal Party. And they're such a small percentage, so I wasn't being funny there, but they have a very low representation of the vote bloc. The party behind them for this agreement to get them into the coalition was the Sverigedemokraterna, and they have some issues with some people who are actually Nazis, or in Nazi party, which is unbelievable, but that's the case. And yet these are the people promoting a sane energy program and asking for nuclear power and a restoration of Swedish power efficiency and Swedish steady power, so that we can have manufacturing, we can have a steady economy. And so when you look at what's happened in Sweden, we had Fredrik Reinfeldt, who let in a deal with Merkel, the immigrants that were coming from the Middle East and Far East. And so these people were either refugee seekers of asylum from the country they were coming from, and or they were people who they weren't able to get a job because their country was at war, whatever. It really doesn't matter. So the Moderaterna party let these people in, and then we had the Social Democrat Party take over, and then they loosened up our crime laws. They allowed people to come in, and they're not letting people, they're not forcing people out when they fail in their application. So I went through the application process where first I had the permanent tillstånd, or permanent standing to be a resident in Sweden. And then what I decided to do was actually become a Swedish citizen. And the process was very simple. I had a good job, I had children, I had an ex-wife, I wasn't a criminal, I wasn't doing anything bad, I paid my taxes. So it was a very easy process. But if at some point they had said to me, we're not approving you, then I technically could have been shown out of the country, or persona non grata. However, with the previous administration, they didn't do this, they didn't enforce the law. So we have a sense of criminality. And then there were lighter criminal sentences, and people were let out early because we felt that they had learned their lesson. We like to give people a second chance in Sweden, which is very good. But we now have a problem with our society where in Europe, we're the highest in shootings. We have some of the highest drug overdoses. We have some of the highest drug-related crimes. So our society is breaking down. And there's a question of what should be done. So we recently came out with an agreement with the government where only 900 people would be accepted in. The max would be 5,000. We took the minimum that the EU says that we would have to take, and that's 900. And Sweden has started to take a policy of saying we should send people who are not citizens out of the country, let them serve criminal sentences in the countries that they come from. So there was a recent case where a man raped two women in their apartments. One the first time, he was let out, and then a second woman, and he has not been shown the door or made to leave the country, despite the fact that he's not a Swedish citizen. So we've had a number of crimes similar to this. It's easy to pick on that one because it just happened and it's very recent and it's very fresh and it's very violent. But we've had a number of these crimes being committed and occurring where the Swedish citizen is suffering. So there's a hardline policy against that. And there's very little change. And now with NATO, in order to make the application to NATO, we have to prove to Turkey that we're not harboring terrorist cells. Now, we've had a number of Swedes who have left and gone to ISIS and then since come back. We've had a number of Kurds who we took into the country, and it didn't matter whether they were Christian or Muslim or Yazidi. We took them in because they were fleeing from Turkey and Turkish oppression. And so Turkey is now saying that we have to turn over terrorist people that they've labeled as terrorists. And this fits in with the whole overall Swedish society and what's happening. And so to highlight what's happening and the dilemma that Sweden is facing, there was a Chechen blogger. His name was Abdu Rachmanov, and he was a blogger. He was killed over the weekend or prior to the weekend. He was shot. There were over the last 2 years. So he'd been living in Sweden. He was living in a small town called Gävle. It's one of our larger cities, but it's a still small town. And there were two Russian assassins who were sent to kill him and attempted to do so. They didn't succeed, but this time it's happened and he was shot. And so we see the breakdown of the Swedish society. We see the breakdown that was caused by the previous government, and we see the breakdown that was caused by the current government in a previous administration. And Swedish citizens are upset, they're worried, and it really comes down now more to feeding into political frenzy to say, what's going on with our country and why haven't we corrected the issues that we have known have been here for over 20 years. So you see extremism developing on both sides. You see people looking for extremely lenient sentences, and then you see people looking for extremely hard sentences, and you see people saying throw everybody out. So you have the extremism building, but what's most important is the core to this Swedish society is we're not building a power security or a secure power system for our industry to build here. And that is most important for Sweden in order for Sweden to continue as a modern developed country. And without that, it's going to be very difficult. We're already seeing a drop in sales prices for houses. We're seeing a slowdown in the house sales. We're seeing a slowdown in the apartment sales. We are seeing significant reductions. We're seeing a high amount of debt to the local household consumer. We have a debt agency here called Kronofogden, and they go around and collect the debts and they throw people out of the houses when it's time to leave. And they've seen a dramatic increase in suicides of people who are being thrown out. So the Swedish politicians need to act soon. They need to start to work together instead of sitting there and pointing fingers and saying, you did this, we did this, you did that, we didn't do it. And that's unfortunate because that's what's happening. So if you're looking at the Swedish economy and where you'd want to invest, well, windmills have been a popular theme, and windmills continue to get a lot of popularity. They'll return a faster yield if you set it up as a REIT than, say, a nuclear power plant. So that could be an idea. Pharmaceuticals, we still have pharmaceuticals. We're still delivering the power to the pharmaceutical plants, although we are talking about brownouts in Stockholm, and we almost had the electrical shutdown of Malmo this past weekend. So we're not quite at developing world, but we're approaching that unless our politicians get their act together. And so although we're moving into Christmas, it doesn't look like we're going to have many presents under the tree. Some will certainly be getting coal because they haven't been doing a good job, and hopefully Santa's going to cross them off the list. But we'll see what happens. So remember, there's always money to be made, of whether it's long or short positions in the market. If you're playing options, if you're trading for the long term or the short term, you can always make money in the market. It's about evaluating your risk and making your decision. So I would advise you to speak to all or any advisor that you have that's a registered advisor and consult with them. But we'll wish you a good day, and hopefully we start the Christmas season soon and things start to look better. Thank you very much for your time. Bye.